Parents deceived me into funding my sister's conversion therapy, and now I'm determined to unmask their treacheries to rescue her. I live in Florida, as do my parents, and I've found myself needing help with an unbelievably serious situation. My name is not important right now, but I work as a computer engineer and have built a good, frugal life for myself since I moved out at 18. My parents, on the other hand, are both in traditional white-collar jobs. They make quite a bit more money than I do, but they're catastrophic with their finances. Growing up, my parents were the holiday church types, not too religious, not too political. But in the past 3 or 4 years, everything changed. In particular, the last year, fueled by the last election, has turned them into some of the most hyper-religious and excessively political people I've ever known. I wanted to keep some distance, so I simply stopped engaging them in conversations about politics or religion at all. My private disagreement with their increasingly hateful views was one thing, but I refused to battle over the phone. My parents don't know about my real thoughts, and I don't want to engage in their drama. My younger sister and I never used to be close, it was mostly the age gap. But lately, she's grown up quite a bit. She's easy to talk to, and we've spoken daily since she was around 14, much more than I talked to our parents. I managed to steer clear of their drama because I told both sides that I didn't want any part, but my sister knew that I basically agreed with her. She is a lesbian, and I have absolutely no issue with that, but my parents, as far as I knew, had no clue, and I knew they'd react horribly if they found out. She and I talked about this often. Her political views are also the total opposite of our parents'. She even got in trouble for not supporting their favorite candidate, which you can probably guess. I consistently encouraged her to just lay low for her own sanity. She sometimes brought up wanting to come out to them, but I seriously discouraged her. I'd heard my parents praise a pastor who disowned his own gay son, and similar stories. No way did I want her to go through that. I'd already promised her that my door would be open if she ever wanted out once she turned 18, but really, I figured that was a worry for the future. I made her promise she wouldn't say anything yet, and she gave me her word. On her 16th birthday, she came out to them anyway. That night, I was upset with her, more out of fear for her than anger, but still, I chided her over the phone. I realize now that was stupid and unfair. She was furious with me and for 4 days she didn't call. That might not sound like much, but for us, it felt like an eternity. When we finally talked, I was gentler, but I could tell things were falling apart. My parents didn't kick her out, but the atmosphere was ice. They refused to speak to her at all. She screamed, they disappeared into their rooms, and there was just this silence. I offered to call my parents for her, but she begged me not to, and I hesitated, against my better judgment. About a week later, my dad called me. He told me he was sick and needed emergency money, about $20,000, and begged me not to tell my mom or my sister. I'd refused to help them before. They've tried to drag me into their financial messes, but this time, I caved. As much as I didn't trust their financial sense, the idea of my own father lying about his health like that seemed unthinkable. He'd always been serious about honesty, and I felt guilty even for doubting him. So I helped. Another week passed. My sister suddenly stopped calling. I assumed she might still be upset with me. She wouldn't answer, period. I began to worry. When I called my parents for answers, they brushed me off, saying she was being moody. That night, I saw a days-old Facebook message from one of my sister's friends, desperate to reach me. Her friend told me that my sister had been taken from her house. Men in a van, who apparently worked for some kind of program, showed up with my parents present and took her away, after kicking her friend out. The friend later learned from my parents that they'd sent my sister to a religious program, though they didn't provide a name. When I confronted my father, he lied at first. But after a long conversation, he finally admitted what they'd done. My anger was off the charts. I discovered that these religious camps exist, places where parents can ship their kids off, and it's technically not a crime as long as the parents consent. What I hadn't realized was how expensive these places are. With dread growing in my stomach, I called him back to confront him about the money. He admitted that's where it all went. I demanded her release. He refused, saying it was his money. I told him I would never speak to him again, and he just acted like he didn't care. I've tried calling, again and again, but they ignore me. He actually refuses to tell me the name of the facility or program. I've done my research, and these places aren't just controlling, they're dangerous. They can be out of state, or even out of the country. People have died, have been brainwashed. I feel sick with guilt because without my money, they couldn't have done this. I have no idea what camp she's at. I was tricked, and technically, I gave them that money. The only thing that even feels possible to me now is exposing my parents publicly, ruining their precious image. I saw a Facebook post they made bragging about sending her to some elitist Christian boarding school, but I already called that school, and she is not enrolled there. They lied to everyone. My parents are pillars in their suburban, church-heavy community. If the truth about what they did came out, it would threaten everything about the life they cherish. I'd cut ties with them completely if I thought it would get my sister out. But right now, I have no idea where she is, and I'm completely at a loss. Update 1. I explained my situation to my boss, and, to my relief, he was incredibly supportive. Without hesitation, he gave me some time off so I could try to deal with this mess. Last night, I packed up and drove across Florida to see my parents, determined to have one last rational conversation before I did anything else. When I arrived, I tried to lay everything out for them, the reality of the abuse that happens regularly at these so-called communities, the details I'd learned about how those places operate. I pleaded with them, explaining that sending her there wouldn't even change her sexuality or her perspective. I was desperate for them to understand. But they just called me a liar or ignored me outright. In that moment, I don't think I'd ever felt less respect for my parents. I couldn't even bring up the money. I was afraid that my dad would throw me out then and there. The worst part was how nonchalant they both seemed, like nothing I said really mattered. Out of options, I made appointments with not one, but 2 lawyers. I wanted professionals who would understand, so both were LGBT friendly and had some experience in similar battles. They each took about an hour to walk me through how utterly screwed I am, legally. Because of how the gift was given, they explained, there was no way to interrupt it or claim conditions were attached. I have absolutely no legal grounds to get my sister out, and without even knowing the name of the place she's been sent, I'm powerless. One lawyer even warned me not to make this public among their friends, since that could ruin any remote chance of legal action in the future. Both of them essentially told me there was nothing I could do. I was at my absolute wit's end. I had one last-ditch plan. I drove back to my father's house and told him straight, I'd give him almost everything I had left, around $65,000, though I lied and said $55,000 so I'd still have something, if he'd just take my sister out of that camp and let her live with me. I couldn't believe I even had to make such an offer to the man I'd always considered a moral authority. He left the room to talk things over with my mother. When he came back, he surprised me. He said yes, but only if I promised not to involve the police. I told him I'd need him to sign a contract and give it a few days, and he said he might be okay with that, but wanted to think it over. He didn't want my sister legally in my name, though, because he didn't want to pay child support. The urge to spit in his face was overwhelming, but I managed to hold it back. All of this went down less than an hour ago. I have another appointment with an attorney tomorrow, but I don't really think it's possible. At this point, I may not even go. If I just handed over the money without any obligation, I know he'd take it and do nothing. I keep circling around the idea of agreeing to their terms, giving them the money without a contract, as soon as my sister is home and I see her safe. Then I could take her and relocate to another state with her, keeping her with me until she graduates. I work remotely now, so I'd be able to make it work until I found something new. My father basically gave the impression that he's already disowned her, so I doubt he'd pay a second time to send her away again, but I'm just guessing. I know I can't get a legal contract that lets me buy custody of a minor. But what about some sort of agreement where they promise not to send her to another institution like that? Maybe one that says she has to go to and graduate from a particular high school, or else they return the money? I'm just desperate for any way to get her out and bring her to me, whether she's legally in my name or not, without giving my parents grounds to track us down and put her through that trauma again. I know this all sounds insane, but I feel completely insane. Guilt and stress have me so wound up I keep vomiting, and sleep is impossible. I'm about to down a few sleeping pills just to get some rest tonight. Thank you for any guidance. It sickens me just how the legal system can completely ignore the suffering of innocent teens. I've never felt angrier on a 4th of July in my life. We talk about freedom in this country, but then things like this can happen, and be legally justified. Edit, I met again with the attorney. He spelled it out for me. Not only could I go to jail for my plan, it's just flat out dumb. So I'm not giving them any money. But he also made it clear, there's still no legal way for me to get her. There's nothing I can do, at least in the courts. His only advice was to try to resolve this from a civil perspective. But my parents won't listen to reason. Update 2. Currently, I'm writing this from a hospital bed. Truth be told, up until yesterday, I thought I was just dealing with a terrible flu brought on by all the stress following everything that happened. But things kept getting worse, and finally, I went to the doctor. She ordered a spinal tap almost immediately, and now it turns out I have bacterial meningitis. So, I'm feeling like garbage, bored out of my mind, but with a strange amount of free time. Maybe that's why I finally have a chance to tell what happened, now that, in a way, it's been resolved. If any of this comes out incoherent, I'm sorry, my brain is kind of fried right now, and even putting words down is taking a surprising amount of effort. So, here's the horribly shortened version. I never gave my father a cent, and the two of us basically decided to act like I'd never even offered, and he'd never accepted. Just wiped it from reality, like it was easier for both of us to never acknowledge that whole ugly bargain. As for my sister, I managed to find out about the camp she'd been sent to, thanks to my mom's constant need for computer help, which she still asks me for. I learned it was one of those horrifically described religious therapy camps, several states away. I started searching online and found these haunting horror stories from people who'd been through that exact place. I showed everything to my mom and dad, absolutely determined they would see what they'd tangled themselves up with. But, honestly, I knew that appeals to logic might not be enough, so I found a religious figure from their own community, a person they both genuinely respected and listened to, someone a bit more sympathetic. After an exhausting battle of wills, I finally convinced my parents to come with me to get my sister out of there. We flew out, just the three of us, and what followed was truly a nightmare. The camp staff fought tooth and nail to keep us out. They took forever before they'd even let her see us, which had my parents furious, especially when glimpses of the facility showed just how awful it all really was. The staff kept telling my parents that my sister would lie, that we should just go away without seeing her. That only pushed my parents closer to the edge. I genuinely thought we'd have to get the police involved to get her out. By some luck, and many tense hours, they finally let us see her. I was terrified my sister would lose her cool and yell at them, which might have complicated everything, but she played her part well. She pretended she'd changed, didn't say a thing out of line, didn't say anything to jeopardize her release. She knew exactly what was at stake and didn't even need me to tell her how to play it. So, now she's home. Got her out a few days ago. Meanwhile, here I am in the hospital since yesterday. Now, my parents are basically pretending the whole thing was some comic misunderstanding, like they were bamboozled into thinking it was a 4-star resort and this was nothing but a wacky misadventure where they stole my money and sent my sister off to what was, in reality, an abusive gay conversion prison. They laugh it all off. To them, it's just a shared family joke now, like we're all victims together of this absurdity. Meanwhile, my sister and I, well, we've come to a kind of unspoken agreement. She won't rock the boat, won't make waves, at least until she turns 18. Then she'll move out and live with me during college. Unfortunately, we've still got 2 painfully long years until then. Every day, it's harder to stomach. The hypocrisy, the BS, the fact that I can't even say a word to them. I despise it, I despise them, but for now we both just have to swallow it all and wait it out. As for me, once my sister turns 18, I'm done, completely finished with them, never planning to speak to them again. I know this is written badly, but it's taken everything out of me to get these words down, and I'm sure I'm missing some details. But that's the heart of it, the main points, the ugliest parts, out in the open now. Update 3. I'm finally out of the hospital after nearly 2 weeks, though I'm still dealing with some lingering headaches and fatigue. The doctors say full recovery from bacterial meningitis can take months, but honestly, the physical symptoms are nothing compared to the emotional exhaustion I'm dealing with at home. My sister has been staying strong, but I can see the cracks starting to show. She's been having nightmares almost every night since we got her back, and my parents just pretend not to notice when she wakes up screaming. They've gone back to their usual routine of acting like nothing happened, except now there's this weird, forced cheerfulness whenever we're all in the same room together. The real bombshell came last week when I was going through my mail that had piled up while I was in the hospital. Mixed in with the usual bills was a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. Turns out, the religious camp is threatening to sue my family for the remaining balance they claim we owe them. Apparently, my parents only paid about half of what they'd agreed to, and now they want another $35,000 or they're taking us to court. When I confronted my dad about it, he just shrugged and said he figured they wouldn't actually come after the money since we'd pulled my sister out early. The man who used to lecture me about honesty and keeping your word apparently thought he could just stiff these people and walk away clean. But here's where it gets really twisted. My mom pulled me aside yesterday and suggested that maybe I should help them pay the remaining balance for the family's sake. She actually had the nerve to say that since I was the one who forced them to take my sister out early, I should take some responsibility for the financial consequences. I told her absolutely not, and that's when she dropped the real bomb. She said that if we don't pay, and this goes to court, everything will become public record. All the details about why my sister was sent there, everything about our family drama. She said it would ruin my sister's reputation in their community and make it impossible for her to have a normal senior year of high school. The worst part? I think she might be right. My sister is already struggling to readjust, and if word gets out about where she was and why, the gossip in their suburban church community would be merciless. Some of these people still think conversion therapy works. So now I'm stuck. Do I let my parents deal with the legal consequences of their own actions, knowing it might destroy what's left of my sister's teenage years? Or do I bail them out again, essentially rewarding them for what they did and enabling their complete lack of accountability? My sister says she doesn't care what people think and that I shouldn't pay them a dime. But I can see how much she's already suffering, and I can't imagine adding public humiliation on top of everything else she's been through. The lawyers are giving us until the end of the month to respond. 3 weeks to figure out if I'm going to let my parents' house of cards finally collapse, or if I'm going to prop it up one more time for my sister's sake. I used to think the hardest part would be getting her out of that place. Now I'm realizing that was just the beginning. Update 4. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep, and honestly, I don't know who else to tell this to. The situation with my family has taken a turn I never saw coming, and I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me. First, the lawsuit situation. I decided not to pay the camp's remaining balance. My sister was right, rewarding my parents' behavior would only enable them further. When the deadline passed, we got served with papers. The case is moving forward, and yeah, it's going to be public record. My sister has been braver about it than I expected, telling me she'd rather face the gossip than let them win again. But that's not even the real story anymore. 3 days ago, my sister came to me with something that's been eating her alive since she got back. She'd been hesitant to tell me because she wasn't sure I'd believe her, but she finally broke down and told me what really happened at that camp. It wasn't just the conversion therapy and abuse we already knew about. She overheard the staff talking about how much money my parents still owed, and apparently, my father had been calling the camp regularly, not to check on her welfare, but to negotiate payment plans. During one of these calls that she managed to overhear, my father told them he was disappointed in the lack of progress and asked if they offered more intensive programs. The staff member apparently laughed and said they had methods for particularly stubborn cases, but it would cost extra. My sister started shaking when she told me this. She said she realized my parents weren't planning to bring her home at all, they were shopping for ways to make her stay longer. But here's where it gets really twisted. Yesterday, I was helping my sister with her laptop when I noticed she'd been researching something called emancipation procedures. When I asked her about it, she broke down completely. She told me she'd been secretly in contact with a girl she met at the camp, someone who'd been there for over a year and whose parents had essentially abandoned her there. This girl told my sister something that made my blood run cold. Apparently, some parents use these camps as a way to permanently get rid of kids they don't want to deal with. They stop paying, the camps keep the kids anyway and put them to work to earn their keep, and everyone pretends it's all part of the program. I didn't want to believe it, but my sister showed me text messages from this girl describing having to do landscaping work and kitchen duty for 12-hour shifts. No education, no contact with the outside world, nothing, just labor disguised as character building. The worst part? My sister thinks my parents knew this could happen. She said my father's calls to the camp weren't just about payment plans, he was asking about long-term care options and what happened to kids whose families couldn't continue to support the program. I confronted my father about this last night. I expected him to deny everything, to act outraged that I'd even suggest such a thing. Instead, he got quiet for a long time and then said something that will haunt me forever. Son, sometimes you have to make hard choices for the good of the family. When I pressed him on what that meant, he said that my sister's lifestyle and attitude were affecting their standing in the community, and that maybe some time away to figure things out wouldn't be the worst thing. He actually said that if she was going to insist on living in sin, maybe she needed to learn what the real world was like for people who make those choices. I think my father was planning to abandon my sister at that camp. I think they took my money knowing they might never pay the full amount, knowing she might end up trapped there indefinitely. And I think my mother knew too. My sister is now 100% committed to emancipation. She's been working with a counselor at school who specializes in LGBT youth, and apparently, she has enough evidence of emotional abuse and neglect to make a strong case. The lawsuit from the camp might actually help her case, since it documents my parents' financial irresponsibility when it comes to her care. I told her I'd support her completely, help with legal fees, whatever she needs. We've already started looking at apartments near her school so she can finish high school without disrupting her education. But I'm struggling with something else now. My sister asked me if I thought our parents would try to have another kid, specifically to replace her with a child they could raise right this time. The question hit me like a punch to the gut because my mother has been making weird comments lately about how it's never too late to start over and how some of their church friends are adopting children. I never thought my parents were capable of the level of cruelty I'm seeing now. The people who raised me, who taught me about integrity and family loyalty, apparently were willing to essentially sell their own daughter into what amounts to indentured servitude because her existence embarrassed them socially. The scariest part is how normal they're acting about all of this. My mother made my sister's favorite dinner last night like nothing happened. My father asked me about work like we're just a regular family having regular conversations. I think they genuinely believe they were doing the right thing. And that might be the most terrifying realization of all. The emancipation hearing is scheduled for next month. My sister is nervous but determined. As for me, I'm done pretending this family can be saved. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, they're meant to be burned so no one else can cross them. Update 5. I'm writing this from my sister's new apartment, well, our apartment now, I guess. The emancipation hearing was 3 weeks ago, and it went better than we could have hoped. The judge took one look at the evidence we'd compiled, the camp documentation, the financial records, the lawsuit papers, and my sister's testimony about what she overheard, and granted emancipation immediately. My parents didn't even show up to contest it. But that's not why I'm writing this update. 2 days after the hearing, I got a call from someone I wasn't expecting, my father's younger brother, Uncle Mike. We'd never been particularly close, but he'd always seemed like the reasonable one in the family. Turns out, he'd been hearing rumors around their church about what happened with my sister, and he wanted to know the truth. I was hesitant at first, but something in his voice made me open up. I told him everything, the money, the camp, what my sister overheard, all of it. There was this long silence on the phone, and then he said something that floored me. I was afraid this might happen again. Again. Apparently, this wasn't my parents' first rodeo. Back when my father was in his early 20s, his older sister, my Aunt Sarah, who I was told died in a car accident when I was little, didn't die in any accident. She was gay, and when she came out to the family in the late 80s, my grandparents sent her to one of these programs. She never came home. Uncle Mike had been trying to find her for decades. He'd hired private investigators, searched records, everything. But these places were even less regulated back then, and kids just disappeared. He said my father knew exactly what these camps were capable of because he'd watched his own sister vanish into one. The worst part? My Aunt Sarah had been sending letters to Uncle Mike for years before she disappeared, begging him to help her get out. He was only 16 at the time and didn't know what to do. By the time he was old enough to take action, the camp claimed she'd graduated and left, but they had no records of where she went. Uncle Mike thinks my father was planning to do the same thing to my sister, let her disappear into the system and then tell everyone she'd run away or something. He said that's probably why my parents didn't contest the emancipation. They knew if it went to trial, too many details might come out. But here's where it gets really twisted. Uncle Mike had been quietly investigating my parents' finances. Apparently, he works for an insurance company and has access to certain databases. He discovered that my parents had taken out a life insurance policy on my sister just 2 months before they sent her to the camp. A big one. When I told my sister this, she went completely white. She said it explained something that had been bothering her, why the camp staff kept asking about her medical history and whether she had any allergies. She thought it was just standard intake questions, but now. We decided to confront my parents together, Uncle Mike included. We drove over to their house last Sunday, and I've never seen my father look so trapped in his entire life. When Uncle Mike brought up Aunt Sarah, my father actually started crying, but not the way you'd expect. It wasn't grief or remorse. It was frustration, like he was angry that his secret was finally out. My mother, on the other hand, went into complete denial mode. She kept insisting that Aunt Sarah had been sick and needed help, and that the family had done everything they could. When my sister asked about the insurance policy, my mother actually had the nerve to say it was just being responsible and that all parents should have coverage for their children. But my father looked at my sister with this cold expression and said, "You have no idea how much easier our lives would be if you just stayed where you were." The room went dead silent. Uncle Mike actually stepped between my father and my sister, and I think if he hadn't been there, I might have done something I'd regret. That's when my mother dropped the real bombshell. She looked straight at my sister and said, "We're pregnant." My sister was right. They are trying to replace her. My mother is 46 years old. The pregnancy is high risk, and she's been seeing specialists for months. Apparently, they'd been trying to conceive since right after my sister came out, but they kept it secret until they were sure it would stick. The plan, according to my father, was always to have my sister taken care of at the camp so they could focus on raising their new child the right way. He said they'd learned from their mistakes with both my sister and me, and this time they were going to do things differently. When I asked what he meant by mistakes with me, he said I'd been too influenced by liberal college professors and that's why I was enabling my sister's destructive lifestyle. He said if I'd been raised in a more controlled environment, I wouldn't have turned out to be such a disappointment. We left after that. There wasn't anything more to say. My sister has been staying strong, but I can tell this is eating at her. She keeps asking what's going to happen to the baby, whether our parents will be any different this time, or if this kid is just going to grow up thinking they had a sister who died in an accident. Uncle Mike has been helping us piece together more information about Aunt Sarah. He found records showing she was transferred between 3 different facilities over 2 years before she just vanished. No death certificate, no forwarding address, nothing. It's like she just stopped existing. The scariest part is that my parents have been telling people at church that my sister went to live with relatives and that they're expecting a blessing from God to fill the hole in their family. They're already setting up the narrative for their new child, the story where my sister never existed. I don't know what we're going to do about the baby. Part of me thinks we should call child services preemptively, but Uncle Mike says we need more concrete evidence of abuse or neglect before anyone will take us seriously. Right now, it just looks like family drama and speculation. But my sister made a decision that surprised me. She said she wants to keep trying to find Aunt Sarah. Even if the worst happened, she wants to know for sure. She says she needs to understand exactly what our parents are capable of, and what they might do to their new child if things don't go according to plan. I never thought I'd be in a position where I'm genuinely afraid of what my own parents might do to an innocent baby. But after everything I've learned, I can't shake the feeling that their fresh start might not end the way they're planning. The insurance money would solve all their financial problems. And they've already proven they're willing to make their children disappear when it's convenient. I just hope we can find Aunt Sarah before it's too late to stop history from repeating itself.